You are tired because you stayed strong for too long. Even the earth rests before it blooms again.
You woke up this morning already tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that lives somewhere deeper, behind your eyes, in your chest, in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. Maybe you've been carrying something for a long time now, something you can't quite name, a weight that followed you into this day bad and the day before, and the one before that. Maybe life has been asking too much of you lately, and you've been saying yes, even when everything inside you wanted to say stop. Maybe you've been trying so hard to be okay that you forgot what okay actually felt like. If any of that sounds familiar, you don't need to explain yourself here. You don't need to perform strength. You don't need to have it all figured out. Because what you're about to hear was never meant for people who have it all together. It was meant for people who are tired, people who are searching, people who are quietly wondering if they'll ever feel like themselves again. So just breathe for a moment and stay with me. Before we continue, take a second and check if you're already subscribed to the channel. It means more than you know. And write in the comments, which country are you watching from? I'm here in Utah, and honestly, it never gets old seeing people from Australia, Japan, Brazil, the UK, all across the United States, all sitting with these same words, all carrying their own version of this weight. That alone tells you something important. You are not as alone as you feel right now. Okay, let's go deeper. Somewhere along the way, modern life made a quiet promise it never kept. It promised that if you worked hard enough, moved fast enough, achieved enough, you would eventually feel settled, complete, at peace. But most people who are watching this right now have worked hard, have moved fast, have achieved things they once only dreamed of, and they still wake up feeling like something is missing, like there's a gap between who they are and who they were supposed to become. The elders understood this, not because they read about it in books, not because they attended seminars or listened to lectures, but because they watched, they observed. They sat in silence long enough to see what most people spend their whole lives running from. They understood something about the human heart that our modern world has slowly, quietly forgotten. And these teachings, they aren't complicated. They don't require a degree. They don't ask you to believe in anything you haven't already felt somewhere deep inside yourself. They only ask one thing, that you slow down, just enough to actually receive them. Stay with this until the end, because the final reflection in this video, I believe, may be the exact thing you've needed to hear for a very long time. There is a reason you feel the way you feel, and it is not weakness. The elders would look at the way modern people live, the constant noise, the endless rushing, the pressure to perform, to produce, to prove, and they would not call it strength. They would call it exhaustion pretending to be purpose, because here is what they knew. A person was never meant to carry the weight of the entire world on their back and still smile like everything is fine. We were not built for the pace we are living at. We were not designed to be reachable every second of every day, to answer every message, to meet every expectation, to carry the grief of the entire news cycle before breakfast. The human nervous system, the human spirit, was built for rhythm, for quiet mornings, for rest that actually restores, for connection that goes beneath the surface, for seasons of doing and seasons of simply being. The elders lived close to that rhythm, not because life was easier for them, in many ways it was harder, but because they never made the mistake of confusing movement with meaning. They knew that a river that never slows down never allows anything to grow along its banks. And so the question isn't, why are you struggling? The question is, when did you last give yourself permission to actually rest? Not just sleep, not just close your eyes and scroll. True rest, the kind where your mind goes quiet, where you're not planning, not solving, not rehearsing conversations in your head. The elders had a word for what we're describing, though it translated differently in different tongues. But the meaning was always the same, coming back to yourself. And many of us have been away from ourselves for a very long time. Here is something most people never realize. The mind that won't stop racing is not a broken mind. It is a frightened one. Overthinking is not a personality flaw. It is what happens when a person has lived through enough uncertainty, enough pain, enough disappointment, that their mind learned to stay on guard, always scanning, always preparing for the next hard thing. The elders understood this. They would not look at someone who couldn't quiet their thoughts and tell them to just relax. They would sit with them. They would say, "Your mind is trying to protect you. Honor that." And then, gently, remind it that it is safe to rest. There is a teaching that speaks of the mind like weather. You cannot control the weather. You cannot demand the storm to stop or the clouds to part on command, but you can build a shelter. You can find a place to sit inside the storm without being destroyed by it. That shelter is presence, not positivity, not pretending things are fine when they aren't. Presence. Being here, in this moment, without the weight of every past mistake or every future fear pressing down on you at the same time. The elders knew that most human suffering does not happen in the present moment. It happens in the mind's relationship with the past and the future. Right now, in this exact second, you are breathing. Your heart is beating. You are here. The storm may be loud, but you are still here. That is not nothing. That is actually everything. Let's talk about something that doesn't get said enough. Grief is not a malfunction. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is not a phase to rush through. It is not a weakness to overcome. Grief is love with nowhere to go. And if you are grieving something, a person, a relationship, a version of yourself, a life you thought you would have, the worst thing you can do is treat that grief like an inconvenience. Life becomes heavier when we fight our own emotions instead of witnessing them. The elders did not rush grief. They created space for it. They honored it. They understood that grief, when it is not given room to breathe, does not disappear. It goes underground. It comes out in the way you snap at people you love, in the way you can't sleep at 3 a.m., in the heaviness that follows you even into the good days. There is an old teaching that says, "Do not push the river. Let it carry what it must carry, and trust that even rivers in their own time find calm water." If you are carrying grief right now, whether it is fresh or whether it has been quietly tucked away for years, hear this. You are allowed to feel it. You are not too sensitive. You are not too slow. You are not a burden for still hurting. You are simply human, and humans were built to feel. The elders would never ask you to be strong in the way the modern world asks. They would only ask you to be honest. Honest about what you're carrying. Honest about what you need. Honest enough to stop pretending that you're fine when something inside you is quietly breaking, because only what is acknowledged can begin to heal. There is something the modern world is deeply afraid of. Silence. Real silence. Not the silence between songs, not the silence before a notification, not the silence that lasts 4 seconds before you reach for your phone. True silence. The kind that makes you feel things, the kind that asks you questions you've been avoiding, the kind that, if you sit with it long enough, begins to feel less like emptiness and more like home. The elders lived inside silence. They trusted it. They went to it when they needed wisdom, when they needed healing, when they needed to remember who they were. The earth teaches this quietly if you let it. Watch what happens in nature when there is stillness. The deer steps out from the trees. The hawk circles lower. The flowers turn toward light. Life does not reveal itself in noise. It reveals itself in quiet. And we, all of us, are part of that same life. The answers you are searching for may not be in the next video, the next book, the next conversation. They may already be inside you, waiting in the silence you keep filling up with noise because the silence feels too uncomfortable. The elders would say what you are running from in the quiet, that is exactly where your healing lives. Try this, not as a task, but as an invitation. Find 5 minutes today. Just 5. No music, no phone, no podcast. Sit somewhere, inside or outside, and let yourself simply be. Not productive, not solving, not planning, just present. You may feel uncomfortable at first. That's okay. Sit with that too, because something begins to shift when you stop moving long enough to feel where you actually are. Here is one of the most painful things about modern life. We have never been more connected, and we have never been more lonely. There is a difference, and a deep and aching difference, between being surrounded by people and being truly known. Most people go through their hardest seasons in near complete silence, performing okay, showing up, doing what needs to be done, while inside they are quietly asking, does anyone actually see me? The elders knew something about this. They built life around circles, not just physical circles, around a fire in a gathering, but emotional ones. Spaces where every person had a place, where no one was expected to carry their pain in isolation. They understood that human beings are not solitary creatures. We were not designed to grieve alone, to heal alone, to figure everything out alone. And yet, here we are. Most of us living in apartments and houses, surrounded by neighbors we've never met, going through divorce, illness, loss, fear. And when someone asks, "How are you?" we say fine, because we've learned that our pain might be too much, that people are busy, that we shouldn't burden anyone. But that belief, "I am too much," is one of the most damaging stories the modern world taught us to tell ourselves. You were not made to be too much. You were made for belonging. And belonging does not mean having hundreds of followers or thousands of connections. It means having even one person, even one, who you can be fully real with. If you don't have that yet, hear this. The path to belonging always starts the same way. It starts with being honest about your own loneliness. It starts with admitting, even if only to yourself, that you are hungry for real connection. That honesty is not weakness. That honesty is the first door. This one is difficult, because so many of us are still grieving a life we planned and never got to live, a relationship that ended, a dream that didn't work out, a version of yourself that you were building toward. And then something happened, and that version is no longer possible. And no one tells you how to mourn that. They tell you to pivot, to rebrand, to find the lesson, to be grateful for what you have. And maybe those things are true, but they can still come too soon. The elders would not rush this part. They understood that sometimes the most healing thing a person can do is simply sit with the truth of what they lost. Not forever, not in a way that traps you, but long enough to actually honor it. There is a teaching that says, the tree that survives the longest winter does not do so by pretending the cold was not real. It survives by sending its roots deeper, by becoming still, by trusting that the season will change, even when there is no evidence of spring. You are allowed to be in winter right now. You are allowed to not have the answers, to not know what comes next, to feel unfinished and uncertain and not quite yourself. That is not failure. That is the honest experience of being human in a hard season. And seasons, every single one of them, always change. There is a moment, and you may have felt it before, when something shifts. It doesn't usually happen dramatically. There's no lightning, no sudden revelation. It comes quietly, like the moment you realize the rain has stopped. You weren't watching for it. You just looked up and noticed. The air is different now. That's what returning to yourself feels like. It doesn't mean your problems are gone. It doesn't mean your life is perfect. It doesn't mean the grief has fully healed or the questions have been answered. It means that somewhere inside you, something remembers who you were before the wait began. The elders would call this coming home, not to a place, to yourself. And here is what they understood about that returning. You cannot force it. You cannot manufacture it. You cannot rush yourself back to peace the same way you rush everything else, but you can create the conditions for it. You can slow down. You can get outside, even briefly, and let the natural world remind your body of its own rhythm. You can put your hands in the earth or watch the sky or listen to rain or sit near moving water, not because it's magical, but because nature operates at a frequency that the nervous system recognizes and responds to. You can choose one day at a time to be slightly more honest about how you're actually doing. You can let yourself rest without guilt, eat slowly, walk without a destination, sit in silence without immediately filling it. These are not small things. These are the very things the elders built entire lives around, because they knew that peace was not something you found out there in the world. It was something you uncovered in here, by peeling back the noise, the pressure, the performance, until you reach the quiet truth of who you actually are. And so we come to the final teaching, the one I believe you may have needed most. The elders, across many nations, many traditions, many ways of life, shared one quiet truth above all others. It was this: you are not behind, you are not broken, you are not too late. You are a person in the middle of your own story. And the middle of a story is always the hardest part. It's where the questions are loudest and the answers are quietest. It's where doubt lives and hope sometimes feels impossibly far away. But the middle is not the end. The elders would look at you, Not at what you've achieved, not at what you've lost, not at how far you still have to go, but at you, exactly as you are right now. And they would say, you made it through every hard day that came before this one. Every single one. You are still here. That is not nothing. That is the most important thing. The weight you carry is real. The exhaustion is real. The grief is real. The longing for peace is real. And so is your capacity to heal. So is your ability to begin again, quietly, slowly, without fanfare, in the direction of yourself. The earth does not rush the sunrise. It does not panic through the dark. It simply turns, steadily, faithfully, until the light returns. You are allowed to turn that slowly too. You are allowed to trust that the light will return. And when it does, and it will, you may find yourself looking back at this hard season not as the time you failed, but as the time you learned what you were made of. Not because you were strong every day, but because you kept going even when it was quiet, even when it was heavy, even when no one could see how much you were carrying. The elders knew your name for that. They called it courage. Take care of yourself today, not tomorrow. Not when things get easier. Today, you deserve that.